This 90-minute session is focused on gender responsive commodity value chains and gender consideration in farmer support investments. This gender learning program is jointly organized by the Food and Agriculture Commodity System Community, FACS community, and the World Bank Food Systems Land Use and Restoration Impact Program, FOLUR. The session is going to be recorded. My name is Sandra Andraca, and I will be facilitating today together with my colleague, Patricia Christianson. Patty is the Senior Gender Agricultural Systems and Forest Landscapes Specialist of the World Bank. And we will be together in this session, which has been co-designed by us and Agustela. Hello, the
Bonjour.
gender specialist, bonjour, and my colleagues of the FACS community, Alexandra Tala and Alejandra Garcia, and the three of us will be supporting this session. So we invite you to turn on your video, your camera, if you have good connection. And now, please, you can also introduce yourself in the chat box, your organization, and where are you joining us today from. And Alejandra, if you can please share briefly the agenda. We have 4 blocks. We have first Patty will tell us a little bit about the course 1 and 2 and the objectives of this session. Then we have a session, and thank you very much for the panelists and for the presenters with FAO and IFC on gender and value chain issues and opportunity. And then we hear some examples from FOLUR countries, and Stella will present it. And then we have exceptionalist panelists telling their experience from the field, from the countries, from Indonesia, Mexico, and Burundi. And that's, I think, Patty, we are ready, and the floor is yours. So welcome.
Great. Welcome. And I think more people.
Bienvenue.
And I was thrilled to hear we have over 100 people registered.
Donc, j'étais excité à l'idée d'avoir plus de 100 personnes qui sont enregistrées. Donc, pas tout le monde est avec nous maintenant.
Tener el material y van a poder compartirlos ampliamente. Así es que bienvenidos a todos. Estamos emocionados de que nos puedan acompañar. Creo.
Ils vont recevoir toute la documentation. Donc, je souhaite la bienvenue à tous les participants et tous les pays.
Gender person for FOLUR, the Food Systems Land Use and Restoration Program. It is a global environment facility funded program that includes 27 countries and 8 commodity value chains. Unfortunately, we don't have time to do a little recap of FOLUR, but the link is in the chat to learn more about the FOLUR program. So we have a FOLUR gender working group, community of practice, if you will, that UNDP kindly hosts on the FACS community site that you can learn more about and join, please. And we have been setting up a series of gender learning programs, if you will, or courses. This is course 3. You can go to the next slide, please. Just a quick recap of what we did in the first course. We looked at gender and integrated landscape and land use management issues with our partners from UNDP. We had examples from different countries like Honduras, Costa Rica, Ghana, doing some very interesting work on community resource management groups, for example, in the FOLUR project in Ghana. So here in the course 1, we talked a little bit about the why and what gender inequalities exist. What about the different roles, experience, rights, barriers facing women? And how does that impact us as we try to do better integrated landscape management? Next slide, please. We also learned about a World Bank Learning Initiative, an e-course on integrated land use, and I encourage you to check that out. Next slide, please. The second course, we focus more on forest landscape restoration, looking at these processes of tackling, if you will, deforested and degraded landscapes. And there's been some really interesting work done by C4 that I encourage you to check out, really talking about when you're addressing degraded landscapes, what areas to prioritize, what species, and the importance of inclusive participatory processes that really get at the different needs of community members. Next slide, please. We also touched on the types of forest landscape interventions. And here I point to a very good CGIAR e-learning course on gender and inclusion in forest landscape restoration. And again, all these slides will be available to you so you can go to these resources as needed. Next slide, please. I realize I'm going very quickly, but this is a recap. We also looked at the importance of thinking about different types of activities in your landscape work that not only reach, but benefit and empower women, youths, ethnic groups that have been traditionally marginalized. It's really important that we get past just participation and bringing people into meetings, etc., but really thinking about actual actions in our project designs that empower and in fact transform gender relations. So we are trying throughout this series of courses to pull out more and more practical examples for project teams that want to do this. Next slide, please. So this course, we want to focus more on commodity value chains, smallholder challenges, and we've got a really nice lineup of people for you. We've got Erica Valerio from FAO talking about gender sensitive and climate resilient value chains. Then we have Sarah Seavey and Jyoti Dar from IFC, another key partner of FOLUR, talking about private sector work they've been doing. And we've got Stella talking a little bit more about what our FOLUR country projects are doing. And I'm really thrilled that we've got 3 country project team members with us. Weena from Indonesia, Florencia from Mexico, and Leonie and Odette from Burundi to talk about their experiences on the ground. So I think we can move on from there. Maybe you can put their photos up, Alejandra. Great. So here's our experts. You go to the next slide. Yeah. And Stella has been pulling together a lot of materials for us. Again, the challenge is what are people doing? What can people be doing? And next slide. And here we've got Lena, Florencia, and Leonie. Again, thank you so much. I know you're on horrible time zones, so we really appreciate it. We are going to move next year to more regional events, so they're in better timings for different regions. Okay, so with no further ado, then I think we go on to Erica's presentation, if you don't mind. Erica, thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty. So great. So let's introduce myself. I know that Patty already mentioned. So my name is Erica Valerio. I am gender and agri-food systems specialist working at FAO gender team. So it's a pleasure to be here today and talk about this subject that represents both a challenge and also an incredible opportunity.
Inclus dans cet événement qui peut apporter des changements nécessaires, que ce soit dans le côté
sistemas alimentarios y cómo hacer, cómo
equitable opportunities for both men and women. So next slide, please. So in today's presentation, I will talk about the integration of gender into commodities, agri-food value chains. So we will start talking about the sustainable value chains and the role of women. And then I will introduce the FAO's framework designed to analyze value chains from a gender-sensitive lens. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start talking about sustainable value chain. So what is a sustainable value chain? In general terms, a sustainable value chain is a holistic approach that connects all the dots from farmers to consumers. And it's about how all actors in all nodes collaborate to transform raw agricultural goods in a manner that's profitable for everyone and socially and environmentally responsible. Okay, so please, next slide. So in this context, the value chain follows the principles of sustainability in food systems. So, and it is building on three main domains. First, we're looking at the economic domain. In this domain, it's about ensuring profitability throughout all the chain. It's about create decent jobs. Then we have the social impact. Here, the focus is on creating benefits for the society at large, ensuring that profits, all sorts of benefits are distributed and trickle down fairly without discrimination based on gender, race, age, ethnicity, and so on. And also improve outcomes in areas like nutrition and health. And finally, we have the environmental impact. So the value chain must have a positive or at least neutral impact on environment. And considering all aspects involving biodiversity, water and soil quality, and etc. So together, these pillars form the bedrock, the roots for a sustainable value chain. Next slide, please. The role of women in value chains, so they play a very important but often invisible role. They are involved from production to processing, marketing, and are essential actors for the efficiency and the sustainability of the commodity agri-food value chains. But despite of gender being a context-specific issue, when we look at the value chains, it's possible to observe, to see some trends that goes across different value chains in different contexts. For example, women are typically more involved in less profitable activities and less profitable value chains. And when they are involved in lucrative value chains, their work tends to be less visible. And this is not a random event. It is a direct consequence of restrictive gender norms that shape the gender roles, determining behaviors, responsibilities that are appropriated for men and women. And these restrictive gender roles often confine women to the early stage activities, the less visible activities, and then limit their access to resources to higher earning opportunities. So it also direct affect how resources, how the work is allocated, who gets what in terms of resources, or how rights are distributed across the value chain. So understanding this is crucial in helping us to identify where and how to act to change in order to promote more equality and efficiency within these value chains. Next slide, please. To summarize here, so we have women playing a significant role in value chains, yet they have limited access to necessary inputs, services, decision-making participation. They are often concentrated in low-paid and low-skilled nodes, and usually they are invisible from lucrative value chains. So this indicates that the participation in value chain does not automatically translate into economic empowerment. Next slide, please. So it's important to have in mind that not recognizing this role of women in the value chains can not only can significantly undermine the efficiency of the value chains, and then causing this because failing in recognize their multiple roles along the value chain often prevent them to realize their potential and has consequences for the efficiency and productivity in these chains. Next slide, please. Well, within this context, FAO developed a framework for gender-sensitive value chain analysis. Basically, this approach integrates gender considerations at every stage of the value chain, ensuring that both men and women roles are recognized during the analysis. So the gender-sensitive value chain framework here is different from the traditional models of value chain analysis because it incorporates both individual and household levels in the analysis. For example, the framework places individuals at the core, recognizing their characteristics, abilities, their aspirations, and also recognizing how it is influenced by gender. Then also the framework considers the household dynamics, where gender roles and power relations affect participation in the value chain and also the control of the benefits. So by taking this approach, our objective here is we can look at the restrictions that are gender-based, which is the gender-based constraints. And by identifying and analyzing these gender-based constraints, we are able to understand and then address the causes underlying the value chain inefficiencies related to gender inequalities and discrimination. Next slide, please. So the framework analysis uses a systematic approach to identify the root cause of the gender inequality, the asymmetry of power, and along with the analyzing it along the value chain, which often this synergies here, this relation between men and women, the assess or not of the resources in decision making, and so on and so forth. Also, having often lead to a negative outcome. Okay, so next slide, please. Basically, the analysis is guided by two main and interrelated dimensions. It's a little bit small and top of right here, but it's about the access to productive resource. So here in our analysis, we focus on
Accès qui est mis sur les ressources, comment analyser.
Evaluando quiénes están teniendo acceso a ciertos servicios y también quienes están empujándose. Estamos haciendo la referencia a alguna agencia y estamos haciendo el transporte y estamos
relating to the ability to control and control the resources and also the profits. So, and to explore these dimensions, we systematically look at the value chain, asking who does what, who controls what, who benefits from what, and this process is going to guide and help us to identify where are the gender-based constraints. So, next slide, please. As we mentioned at the beginning, this framework also integrate climate change. This inclusion is important because climate change impacts the operation of the agri-food value chains. And these value chains also affect the climate change. And the cycle influence, the cycle of influence need to be considered in our analysis. So it's also important to recognize here that climate change and disaster risk do not impact individuals equally. Women and men experience this challenge differently because they're different roles, because of the different levels of resources and their ability to participate on planning and implementing adaptation actions. So it's critical to understand the different impacts of climate change on men and women in order to identify what are the strategies to increase gender equality in determined context, in determined value chain. Next slide, please. Hope I'm not running too much. So here I'm going to briefly and quickly very summarized present the stages of the framework. First, we have the broad context from gender perspective. We analyze here, we want to understand the economic and the social, the playing field for men and women in that context. This helps us to identify where gender discrimination is most pronounced and the unique challenges and opportunities in that determined context that women may face. The next stage is we select a value chain or a sector. Often it's predetermined by a government strategy or choosing based on feasibility and potential for impact. Then we map and select this value chain, tracing the journey from production to consumption, and then we highlight the roles and contributions across of all actors, breaking down by gender. You can also break down by age. It will help, this exercise helps us to understand that the gender division of labor and access to resources. And based on this, we identify the gender-based constraints, including the impact of climate change analysis at this stage as well. And we want to understand how the climate change is affecting men and women differently in that determine value chain and determine the steps. And finally, we formulate a potential solution recommendation to address these gender-based constraints, and we include it in our overall value chain intervention strategy. And next slide, please. So here it's an example of what a component, just a component of the value chain analysis might look like. So this represents the gender-sensitive mapping of supporting services along the chain, showing who has access to the services across various different nodes in both formal and informal chain. I think that I may be on time, so next slide, please. Here we have several resources and guidelines that FAO developed to support those that are interested to use this framework. And next slide, please. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I am available. I encourage you to contact me and I can support you. So thank you very much. I hope I didn't run too much.
No, that was great, Erica. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate it. And I appreciate FAO's participation in the gender working group. Maurizio first has been involved right from the beginning, other colleagues. And it is great to point out that FAO has some wonderful resources and very targeted ones. So thank you for sharing that. I think in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next speakers. And we're happy to have another core partner of FOLUR, the IFC. And they've been doing some wonderful work on gender from the perspective of smallholders in value chains. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah and Jyoti, to take it from here. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Seavey. I'm joined by my colleague Jyoti Dar, and we're going to be highlighting a recent resource that captures a lot of our best practices and lessons learned. We at IFC recently launched the 3rd edition of our Working with Smallholders handbook for firms building sustainable supply chains in September of this year. There are a lot of great chapters within this book, but just highlighting a chapter focused on women's participation, written by a number of my wonderful gender colleagues, including Jyoti. So this chapter captures a lot of these best practices in increasing women's participation. So next slide, please. So within IFC, we always, we work with a lot of agribusinesses, and we always try to use the language of business when we talk about gender and inclusion and why it's good for businesses to work on gender and inclusion. So this slide focuses on that business case for gender and inclusion. As many of you know, women farmers represent at least 40% of the agricultural labor force, and they have less access to land, finance, training, extension services, and inputs than their male counterparts. We also know that women play various roles various roles in different agricultural value chains, and their tasks are often different, or their tasks often are key to productivity, quality, and income generation. We know that closing global gender gaps in agriculture will increase yields by approximately 20 to 30%, while increasing the total agricultural outputs by 2.5 to 40%. And we also had some great research from IDH, which highlighted that 61% of agriculture, forestry, and fishery enterprises reported that gender diverse policies contributed to increasing profits and productivity. Next slide. I think Erica did a wonderful job highlighting all of those gender gaps. And we know that there are a lot of gender gaps in agribusiness value chains. And there's also some cross-cutting issues that apply to both men and women, and that women have very specific gaps as they participate in agricultural value chains. And I'm going to highlight some of those just from the chapter. So next slide. So some of the challenges that we have seen women smallholder farmers face have been focused around land, finance, access to inputs, information, especially training and technology. We're seeing increasingly more focus on ICT for development. So how can we be using mobile phones and other ag techs to support women? So how can we be supporting women in accessing those technologies? Also, technology could be mechanization as well. So those are things that we've been also hearing and seeing gaps for women smallholders. We also know that safety and transportation are an issue. Childcare responsibilities are also a major issue, especially in accessing opportunity and accessing leadership opportunities and also training. And we have also seen women have gaps in accessing markets. We know that youth also have similar access challenges. And we've also seen in our different gender mapping exercise or gender work, lower participation in membership and leadership in farmers associations and cooperatives. Next slide. So just wanting to highlight how we how we work within IFC and how we integrate gender throughout the project lifecycle. We really focus on integrating gender through the design and throughout implementation. And so here, just highlighting that work. So looking at the plan phase. So we actually have different tools that we use depending on this different stakeholders that we're engaging, different actors we're engaging. And we try to do a holistic approach where we're looking at the agribusiness that we're doing, and we have a corporate gender assessment where we're looking at their employees, their policies and procedures, also looking at how those policies and procedures impact their suppliers, so the smallholder women farmers that are engaging in that value chain. What are those policies and procedures, relationships? We also do in-depth gender mapping of those smallholder farmers, looking at their gender roles, trying to identify if there's different gender biases, limitations, what those constraints are, and just examining those issues through both qualitative and quantitative work. We also, in the design phase, will be using that gender analysis to link it to the company's business strategy and business objectives and the project's objectives as well. And we choose interventions, gender smart interventions that take gender into consideration. We also are looking to create ownership among farmers and beneficiaries. And then in the implementation phase of a project, building staff capacity so that they have gender sensitization, that they're aware of those gender-based constraints and can identify opportunities where they can be increasing inclusion within their work. And of course, gaining support from local community and leaders. And then because we love trying to identify those best practices, we know how important it is to be monitoring and evaluating our work. And one thing that we always emphasize, and what the chapter emphasizes, is the need for projects teams to, understand these issues throughout each phase. And that they identify realistic and comprehensive budgets for gender activities so that they can cover all the costs that go into the gender analysis, the gender mapping, corporate assessments, the implementation of those gender smart interventions, and ensure that they're monitoring and evaluating their work and, documenting, creating communications and doing proper knowledge management to highlight, what those practices are, so that we can be sharing this out in events like this. So next slide. Just wanting to highlight here just some of the gender smart agri solutions that we've been focusing on within our work at IFC. So looking to improve access to training, also to extension services. We've been looking to train more women extension service agents as well. Improving access to financial services and literacy. Improving women's access to leadership and decision-making positions. So similar to what Erica was talking about earlier about improving agency. And then improving access to technology and inputs. Looking at also psychological safety. So access to and addressing childcare and gender-based violence. And this is something that we've been doing with our corporate gender assessments, and when you're looking at the policies and procedures of a company, and especially the relationships with their suppliers. Then also just resources and training to partners to prevent gender-based violence. And then lastly, the measurement piece, using sex disaggregated indicators and gender inclusive indices to be used to measure women's economic empowerment. And in the book chapter, and I think everyone may be familiar with the Women's Empowerment in Agricultural Index. That's just one example that we've highlighted in the book of the best practices. And my next slide, just looking at an illustrative list of gender-related key performance indicators, just wanting to highlight here some of those illustrative performance indicators that we measure within our projects. So number of women reached directly or indirectly, number of number of employees participating in training, number of extension agents recruited, and this of course disaggregated by sex, number of suppliers and distributors in the company's value chain, again disaggregated by sex, and then number of agreements signed by farmers and off-takers per year. The list can go on and on. I just wanted to highlight this is some of those key performance indicators, and we really, for each agribusiness we work with, we focus on what their gender equality priority areas are and objectives, and select based off of those. But these are some of our some of our key performance indicators that we've been using in our IFC results measurement framework. And it's just really important to be tracking growth and progress so that we can keep scaling up those good best practices. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Jyoti to speak about a business case, or not a business, to speak about one of our clients. In the chapter itself, we have a lot of other examples, but I'm so happy that Jyoti could be with us and talk to you about this case study next. So off to you, Jyoti.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and very good day to everybody. Today, we'll speak about a case from India. This is a private sector company which has a sugarcane value chain, and IFC first, partnered with them in the sugarcane production. So this example really showcases some of the points that Sarah mentioned about how we began the relationship with DCM by showcasing how the inclusion of women, gender inclusion would benefit them. And they're working in an area in India, in the north of India, where social norms practically make women invisible, even though they are in the value chain of sugarcane. 60% women are working there as women, as laborers, as farm labor. So the recognition of the participation was the first challenge that we faced, and the convincing of the company to be able to include women in or let's say recognize the participation of women in their value chain. We began the relationship with DCM Shriram in sugarcane production early on in 2008, 2009. And as we progressed with the gender assessments and the baseline surveys, as Sarah mentioned, both quantitative and qualitative, we pointed out to our client the relevance of gender inclusion in any intervention that we would like to roll out as part of the project objectives. We then targeted approximately 11,000 women farmers to be trained in sugarcane production. And these were, and when we say farmers, it was, the first task was really women identifying themselves as farmers. So they would always look at themselves as support or labor. So when we talked to women farmers, it was also women laborers who were very much on the fields in sugarcane production, and women who were really supporting their husbands in the production of sugarcane. So involving all the women as farmers who were helping in the production process. So we targeted approximately 11,000 women who were trained. We saw an increase of 25% in the sugarcane yield. as the project grew, or as the project cycles were coming to an end, we found that the client, DCM Shriram, was far more interested in continuing our association with IFC, and were interested in diversifying their engagement with women on the ground. So we then moved into another program, which was the Seed Nursery Management Program, because women were intrinsically involved in the seed nurseries and the transplanting of the seedlings and the land preparation. So that was a second, sort of sub project program that we did. We started with Shriram, DCM Shriram, and involved women as entrepreneurs. So developing them as entrepreneurs was really the next stage in our engagement with women and inclusion of women in the business of DCM Shriram. The sugarcane nurseries actually worked through what they call the self-help groups. These are really cooperative societies, kind of cooperative societies. And we realized that the best way to get women, increase women mobility within the community actually was through these self-help groups. These self-help groups were actually recognized also by the male members of the communities as being safe for the women to, move in, to train, to, let's say, go and create the seedlings, sell the seedlings, transplant the seedlings in the farms of other farmers. And it was this format of the self-help groups that really helped us to accelerate, our support for the women entrepreneurs, and to spread the message, cascade the message within the community of climate smart, seed nursery management and climate smart agriculture, which was one of the prime objectives of the association with, or the project with DCM Shriram. We then, moved into another. So there are approximately 100 to 130 women entrepreneurs that we then identified, trained, and supported during the course of the project. And this is still an ongoing exercise. We also realized that women were very present in the dairy value chain, and this was, this is something that the client also recognized was in synergy with sugarcane production, because sugarcane, tops were used as feed for the cattle, and also the sugarcane, the soil of the farms was let's say bettered by the cattle residues, in the sense of the cow dung, etc., and they were used to make the soil more fertile in a very organic way. So this synergy that was realized by the client helped us to then move into another program with them, which was the Dairy Gender Initiative. Here we targeted approximately 30,000 dairy farmers, of which 80% were women. So this was a program in which we wanted to enable and upgrade and upskill the women in the dairy value chain, because 90% of all activities within the dairy value chain were done by women. So this was, another way of gender inclusion. And in some ways, we found that gender inclusion or using these programs of creation of women entrepreneurs and women in the dairy value chain was also helping the participation of women, or increasing the participation of women in the main produce of the client, which was sugarcane. So this was a great learning for us. And this the dairy program actually started midterm in the project cycle. So that was something that we also realized, that redesigning or reorienting some of our objectives midterm was also a beneficial step that we could take for inclusion of women. Can you take the next slide, please? Thanks. Here we have some of the. We have a quote from one of our seedling entrepreneurs, and these are women who started an SHG, which had 12 members of women. These women were mostly from landless families, but they were involved in the seed nursery creation within this SHGs, and how the women have actually been able to do away with middlemen who not only give them misinformation but also charge them high amounts in procuring of these seedlings. Also, the distance that they had to travel to procure these seedlings reduced, and so drastically reduced the cost of the creation of the seed nurseries, and also, supplying them to other farmers in their communities at a good price. So that was, some of these stories and some of these case studies are give us the sort of motivation to carry on with our and scale up some of our initiatives and interventions. These two publications that we have, which also showcase some of the stories and some of our projects and the beneficiaries and the impact on the lives of the beneficiaries. One of them is the Seeds of Success, which is across South Asia. We have stories from different countries showcasing our women, beneficiaries. And we have a small study which has looked at the seed nursery management within the sugarcane sector and has showcased two of our clients. One is Olam and the other is DCM Shriram. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah and Jyoti. That is wonderful. We were tempted to take questions right now, but I'm a little worried about time. And also, I see some really good questions in the chat, and I think we can start responding in the chat as well. And then at the end, we're going to come back, okay, and try to make sure that we have addressed some of these questions. I'm really thrilled with those presentations because we're kind of starting broad. What are the issues, the real, the tools, approaches out there? With Erica talking about the cost of ignoring women's value chain roles, the link to climate change adaptation. Sarah and Jyoti, the gender throughout the project cycle. I think that is really key. And I love your examples because what you show is going from indicators of number of women trained, which we all do fairly well, to how do we get to the so what? How is that lowering cost of production? How is that increasing yields, lowering the distance travel to get inputs you mentioned? There are tools out there now that help us think about measuring leadership and other empowerment indicators. I point you to the W+ standard, and we can talk more about that. I think we're moving from output indicators to outcomes, changes. What are these changes in people's lives, in the institutions, in the policies that are really going to matter when we take the time to be much more inclusive and thoughtful about when, where, how we do trainings, for example. So speaking of that, we're going to go now to some FOLUR examples, the food system, land use, and restoration. And I'm going to ask Stella to give us a few of the examples that we're seeing in those projects. Thank you, Stella.
Yes, hi everyone. So I work as a consultant with the UNDP for FOLUR program to help with the designing of this learning program as well as other resources. So we've pulled out some country project examples based on a document that our colleague Lavinia actually Gasparini, who works with UNDP, developed she did an overall desk research on all FOLUR country projects and their interventions in the three main areas: integrated landscape management, forest restoration, and sustainable value chains. And from that report, we were able to pull out some gender-specific interventions that we'd like to present to you. FOLUR has 27 country projects, and about half of them have started implementation, but they're still in the early stages. So as time passes by, we'll have more information on what specifically they're doing on gender-related issues, as well as other focus areas. Next slide, please. So these are some examples. So as I mentioned, there are 3 main areas of FOLUR, but these are specific to commodity value chains. And depending on the country project, some may focus more on gender integration in integrated landscape management or forest restorations, and some others more on commodity value chains. So it depends from country to country. These are some examples of activities that we would consider quite general, because they're not providing many specific or concrete activities that we would have wanted to see in the project proposals, such as Burundi, but we'll have a chance to hear more about Burundi later. Côte d'Ivoire, trainings to women. So it's more about trainings and participation. And as we discussed, and it was very, very nicely highlighted by the previous speakers, we really need to move beyond just participation to more concrete results and having women benefiting from different interventions, extension services, support, financial support, etc. Next slide, please. Here are some sort of more specific value chain gender activities that we can see we are able to see the difference between those general ones and these more specific ones. Here in China, for example, they are planning to support women's enterprises and women-led cooperatives, and they have also set up targets ensuring that at least 21 of 50 farmer cooperatives are managed by women and have a significant share of women members. So we'll see. I mean, as I mentioned, these are early stages, but it's good that they have some more specific objectives to follow. Paraguay also plans to select farms led by women for pilot training under its farmer support activities, as well as strengthening women platforms for sustainable commodity chain. Next slide, please. In Liberia, we have a project that focuses on developing a gender-sensitive monitoring and evaluation system to report on women participation. But this has to be linked with other activities that they have planned, and probably they are more active, I suppose, in integrated landscape management activities or forest restoration, as well as value chains. But we didn't find many specific activities related to value chain in their project proposals. As I mentioned, these are all examples pulled out from the project document, of country offices. And we'll see more in their annual reports and maybe specific action plans, annual action plans that they will develop through the implementation process of their projects. In Ghana, we have seen that they have planned support for provision of post-harvest storage facilities, target training programs for women farmers on village savings and loan schemes, introduction of a gender-sensitive grievance mechanism, etc. After my presentation, we'll have the great opportunity to hear more from country projects, FOLUR, Indonesia, Mexico, and Burundi, where they will provide more specific details on what they are doing. And as we go on with this learning program, I'm very hopeful that we'll see more specific examples from these countries and other countries involved in the implementation. Next slide, please. And these are some other gender responsive activities that actually Patty and Ishita, my colleagues Patty and Ishita, put together from different resources that are sort of more concrete and more specific. And they were also mentioned, some of them were also mentioned by previous speakers. So I don't want to go one by one. You can check them later, but I just wanted to point out the resources that these activities or these examples are pulled out from, because they are also very important. Next slide, please. So these are a couple of resources that we found particularly useful for specific and concrete actions on women's empowerment and participation in value chains. There is this IFPRA value and chain participation study, as well as CGIAR tools and methods for gender research and integration in agriculture value chain. This, together with FAO publications that were mentioned earlier, which are also very useful in this area. And a final reminder, next slide, please. For everyone who is interested to go more in depth into resources related to not only value chains, sustainable value chains, but also integrated landscape management and forest restoration, which are the three main areas of FOLUR. They can find a great deal of resources developed by FOLUR partners in the resource guide on gender equality for FOLUR that we have developed with Patty, Sandra, and other colleagues, and Mauricio as well. I would like to thank him for his contribution. So here, all the resources are organized very well according to the area. A lot of them are cross-cutting, obviously, and they range from theoretical aspects or publications to more concrete tools and examples that we all can use in our work. It also includes a very brief conceptual framework, theoretical, on how to integrate gender in FOLUR projects, but any other agricultural project. So thank you very much. And I look forward to hear now more from our colleagues from FOLUR Country Projects.
Great. Thank you so much, Stella. So Alejandra, can you put up the slide of our three country project speakers, Wina, Florencia, and Leone? Maybe we can see their faces, as they have been challenged. And I understand that this is not an easy question for them, but I have asked them to address the question. Let me make sure I get it right. What do you think are the most relevant gender-related activities or opportunities looking forward for the value chains and the farmer support that you are working in on for your particular project, FOLUR project? I'm going to ask that same question that is now in the chat box to the three of you in order. So Wina, if you could address that first, thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty, and thank you also to all presenters. It's very inspiring, and it's really good to give me an entry point to answer a Patty tough question. So yeah, for Indonesia, as following up from what Stella said, we do actually already have a list of activities specific. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go long because Patty has mentioned to go. So we do have gender action plan. Stella, if it's useful for you to refer to some of the indicative activity, we already on the second year. But if I have to choose one, because Patty asked to choose one that is probably more relevant to the value chain, I would choose the activity. We have 6 areas of gender mainstreaming framework. One of those is enhancing gender equality. So it's ensure equitable proportion of benefits accessed by and deliver to women from the project, including opportunities for training, access to financing, and capital for improved farming practices. So this is actually confirming what has been, said by all the previous speakers, which is really excellent. So it's not just assumption or theory, but for Indonesian case, it is indeed what we found in the field. So I'm confirming that we just came from the field. The pictures that I have there is from our project site in West Kalimantan. So we're speaking to the farmers there, and I'm sad what mentioned by I forgot, Jyoti, maybe that some of the women farmer think that they're not really farmer because they're doing the, supporting activities, but actually they are the real farmers there. So, through FOLUR, we would like to also increase their pride on that. So, Patty, one of the activity that we would really like to do and promote the gender through FOLUR is we're going to carry out a gap analysis for sustainable action plan for 4 FOLUR commodities. It's cocoa, coffee, and rice, because the palm oil, we already have one for Indonesia, but we have 4 commodities. So in that, we would, prepare a set of recommendations for integrating gender-sensitive consideration, which strengthen women farmer support system for development, adoption, implementation, and monitoring. So there's just one door where we going to, enhance the gender responsive activities is through the Sustainable Action Plan for the commodities at national and at the district level. So I'm going to stop there, but I welcome any other follow-up question. Back to you, Patty.
Great. Oh, Weena, I so admire what you're doing. I mean, to tackle several different commodity chains. And I appreciate you need an analysis for each, right? Because cocoa and coffee can be quite different. Yeah, so that's wonderful to hear about these sustainable, very targeted, specific action plans. And that goes back to some of our earlier speakers on the importance of gender analysis. This is not just for gender analysis to say, these are all the problems. It's gender analysis with the participatory approaches that help identify targeted solutions. And I know Florencia in Mexico, in the Conecta project, you've done this very thoughtfully. And I think you have a few things to share. So I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Patty. I'm switching to Spanish now. So just please, I'm going to change the translation. Gracias. Pues primero quería comentar que en el proyecto Conecta estamos trabajando principalmente con ganadería y agroforestería, principalmente café, en 4 regiones distintas de México, entonces que se caracterizan por ser muy vulnerables al cambio climático y por concentrar la mayor parte de la producción ganadera del país.
Of cattle in our country. So just as they've said,
Production de bétail. Et nous avons récemment, nous avons commencé avec un diagnostic du genre qui nous a permis d'avoir une multitude de choix et toutes les organisations locales qui se sont inspirées de notre travail qui ont mis en œuvre ces activités-là.
For the sustainable production, but also for the building up of sustainable businesses, for them to choose these activities to integrate this in a better way and to integrate the gender perspective as well. We have different activities. I'm just going to mention a couple, and then we can go more in depth if you are interested. I believe that a general measurement of this project that it's important to highlight is that we don't need to have the title of the land so that we can be considered a beneficiary of Conecta. This is important because 80% of the people who have the title of these titles are men, and so this has been a way in which we have been able to reach women through this project. And then going to what are some of the activities many of the organizations have implemented nurseries that are being managed by women, and they produce plans for the implementation of agro-silvestry and improving the coffee lands and other types of management. And this, in many cases, has represented the first income that these women receive ever in their whole lives for their work. And so on top of that, some of these nurseries are already doing they have they are doing some financial exploration so that they can keep it more just above and beyond the FOLUR project. And so they are being producing these plans for this agro-silvestry projects in the area. Also, some other organizations have worked making groups for savings for women, so that some of the savings that they have, they can use it to invest in the sustainable production. And in general, many of the sub-projects have been worked in training and productive models, and this is directly associated to the needs and to the needs of women, basically, like the processing of the products and the systems, so like dairy and fruits and milk, models of compost, and also the production of biofertilizers, and also handcrafts that are being done with forestry products. And then moving on to what has to do more with business, I think I would like to highlight the exercise
Dans ce sens, l'exercice que nous avons essayé
initiatives, which is to value the work, the non-paid work that women do, and so to try to incorporate this to those financial runnings that we have, and also to incorporate the gender perspective, the governance of these groups through policies, to regulations. We have created some protocols to prevent gender violence also within this groups. And the last two that I like to mention is the development of coffee brands that have been made by women, so that they could reach other markets and to have like these seals that would allow them to make it visible, all this work that these women are doing. And the other thing is that through a project that is co-financed with Conecta and that FOLUR project, we are going to be working on training on gender perspective, all those financial intermediaries, not only public but also private, so that the products and the services that they provide have this in mind, the needs of women.
Wow, that was wonderful. For those of you in the chat box, oh, now I'm hearing French. For those of you in the chat box that have been asking for, specific examples and best practices, Florencia just gave us a whole lot there. I think we need to work with you a little more, Florencia, let's put out some briefs that give these examples. For example, the targeted financial help, the focus on savings groups, but going also to processing, paying attention to non-paid work, valuing it. How do you value it, include it in financial management? Oh, that's brilliant. The gender-based violence protocols and the branding or certifications for, say, women produce coffee. All really wonderful, very specific examples. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we will be getting back to you on more details. Okay, now we are going to switch to French and ask our colleague Léonie in Burundi the same question. Léonie, what do you think are some of the most important gender-related activities your project in Burundi is doing in the context of value chain improvement? Thank you, Léonie.
Bonjour, bonsoir. C'est Léonie, spécialiste genre inclusion sociale au niveau du projet de restauration et de résilience du paysage du Burundi. Je vais juste vous présenter certaines activités qui sont mises en œuvre dans le cadre du projet pour justement appuyer activités liées au genre plus pertinentes et pour appuyer la chaîne de valeur et le soutien aux agriculteurs et agricultrices sur lesquels nous travaillons. Alors, en guise d'introduction, dans le cadre du Burundi, le Burundi est un pays qui vit essentiellement de l'agriculture, où environ 90% sont des femmes qui œuvrent dans ce domaine de l'agriculture, mais où on remarque que malgré le grand rôle joué par les femmes dans ce domaine, leur rôle n'est pas du tout ou moyennement visible.
Sorry,
Tous,
sorry, interrupt,
pardon.
but I think that we are not hearing the interpretation.
Ah, okay.
Sorry, Leonie.
Okay,
I
go
don't
ahead,
know
go ahead,
if you
go
were
ahead.
able to hear.
So we are interpreting. We are interpreting.
Just one
Yeah.
moment, Leonie, please.
Yeah.
But if you can't.
Okay, Leonie, try again,
You can
please.
speak.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Je disais que le Burundi, comme tant d'autres pays,
Burundi, as many other countries, is an agricultural.
Otros países es un país agricultor que, que va liderando con la agricultura, en donde el rol de las mujeres está más que nada enfocado en esto. 90% de las mujeres son mujeres las que están trabajando en la parte de la agricultura. Sin embargo,
invisible.
Is relatively invisible on account of the limited access of the various resources, including the land and also the access to inputs, income, the access to credit.
Tout ça, la femme a un accès limité par rapport aux différentes ressources. Et ça, c'est juste un état des lieux. Aussi, la femme agricultrice au Burundi a un pouvoir de décision sur l'utilisation de la terre, l'utilisation d'autres ressources. Elle a un pouvoir de décision limité par rapport aux hommes, mais aussi on assiste à d'énormes pratiques qui continuent à mettre la femme dans une position inconfortable pour jouer son rôle dans la production, son rôle actif pour être un acteur ou une actrice très active dans la société. Alors, au niveau de notre pays, au niveau de notre projet, concrètement, c'est un projet qui se focalise sur essentiellement la gestion durable des terres à travers des aménagements des terres, qui s'occupe aussi de la productivité, qui s'occupe de la certification foncière et qui appuie à la protection des aires protégées, c'est-à-dire les différents parcs. C'est sur les 4 aspects essentiels sur lesquels se focalise le PRRPB, notre projet. Alors, à chaque niveau, comment notre pays appuie dans la chaîne de valeur en termes de prise en compte de cet aspect genre, c'est l'essentiel de la question. C'est-à-dire que au niveau du projet, nous avons déjà un indicateur dans la conception qui parle du pourcentage déjà qu'on doit atteindre dans toute intervention. Autrement, nous devons atteindre 51% de femmes qui bénéficient des interventions du projet. Et on doit veiller à ce que les femmes et bien d'autres catégories particulières puissent bénéficier des interventions du projet à au moins 51%. Concrètement, dans la gestion durable des terres, où on fait les creusements des courbes de niveau pour lutter contre l'érosion, où on fait des aménagements, des reboisements et bien d'autres activités. La première activité liée au genre que je peux partager comme une bonne pratique, c'est la certification foncière. Au niveau du Burundi, les femmes n'ont pas accès à la terre. Et aujourd'hui, avec notre projet, on a initié un système d'enregistrer les terres sous 2 noms. Au lieu que ce soit une propriété pour l'homme seulement, c'est l'homme et la femme qui sont sur le certificat. Et autrement, c'est une façon de permettre à la femme d'être propriétaire de cette terre utilisable, c'est accès à la terre. On a voulu renforcer petit à petit l'accès à la terre pour les femmes, où aujourd'hui, dans toutes nos zones d'intervention, la certification foncière, tous les ménages disposent d'un certificat foncier sur lequel est marqué hommes et femmes, donc avec leurs droits dans le cadre de l'accès. Ça, c'est la première chose. Cette activité, c'est aussi une activité qui permet aux femmes, aux ménages, d'accéder au crédit. Parce que tu peux donner en termes de garantie bancaire votre propriété qui est déjà certifiée, qui est enregistrée, qui est reconnue au niveau administration. Et là, vous pouvez avoir accès à un crédit que tu pourrais utiliser en termes de vos besoins. Donc, cet accès, renforcement de cet accès à la terre, mais qui va avec l'opportunité de pouvoir accéder au crédit. Dans le cadre aussi de cet aménagement des activités de gestion durable, les femmes, comme tant d'autres, sont utilisées comme une main-d'œuvre payée. La haute intensité de la main-d'œuvre payée, ce qui leur permet de pouvoir accéder à un montant, à un revenu qui pourrait peut-être contribuer à son autonomisation. Autre chose, pour pouvoir atteindre les 51%, on a une ONG, une organisation qui participe dans la mobilisation communautaire. C'est cette ONG, avec cette expérience en matière de genre, et qui nous aide à mobiliser, à former, à sensibiliser nos bénéficiaires pour pouvoir accéder à nos interventions, à changer de mentalité. Et c'est à travers ces formations que nous avons dispensé une formation sur GARS, Gender Action Learning System. C'est une approche qui permet aux ménages, en fait, on les invite à avoir une vision commune en termes de production agricole. Ça permet à l'homme et à la femme au sein du ménage de faire une planification conjointe au sein du ménage, mais aussi un partage équilibré des rôles et responsabilités au sein du ménage, tout en réduisant ainsi la pénibilité de la femme. Lorsque vous êtes convaincu que les rôles doivent être faits de manière équitable, là, vous réduisez en d'autres termes la pénibilité de la femme. Et ça promet aussi, ce permet aussi une concertation dans la prise de décision, mais aussi ça donne à la femme cette confiance en soi, cette estime de soi,
Esta confianza en ellas mismas incrementa su autoestima para poder tener acceso. Entonces ahora acceso, tienen una palabra, tienen algo que decir, tienen un papel que jugar y son también consideradas, son consultadas y a nivel de productividad, este también sería el segundo aspecto, adicional a la parte de la capacitación y a las campañas de sensibilización a través de los...
Qualifier l'FAO, on travaille avec la FAO, qui dispense ces formations aux producteurs et productrices. Nous espérons appuyer les femmes dans les capacités de pouvoir produire en termes de nouvelles technologies, en termes de nouvelles connaissances pour pouvoir aller les appliquer chez eux ou chez elles et ainsi augmenter la production. Au niveau des comités de gestion des bassins versants, au niveau des comités qui font le suivi, et dans toutes nos activités, on tient à ce que la représentation des femmes soit au moins 51% dans ces comités de prise de décision ou d'orientation. Aussi, une autre activité en plus de la gestion durable, de la productivité, on appuie dans la protection des aires protégées. Les parcs nationaux de la Kibira, de la Ruvubu sont des aires protégées qui étaient avant... Pardon?
Okay. I think hello, I'm going to interrupt here because
Perdón, voy a interrumpir aquí un poco porque nos vamos a ir quedando sin tiempo, nos estamos quedando sin tiempo. ¿Me escuchan bien? Muchas gracias, Leone. De nuevo, igual que ambas ponentes anteriormente, has proporcionado ejemplos muy concretos de lo que están haciendo, están pensando estos proyectos, estos equipos de proyectos. La parte de la certificación de las tierras con los nombres de las mujeres en ellos es crítico realmente.
Done more widely. I know our Ethiopia FOLUR project is also working on land certificates because that does allow women access to credit, as you pointed out, absolutely crucial. So that's food for thought for many people. Can I ask you each just 2 to 3 minutes quickly, the second question, which is, and again, try to think of your top priority. What resources, technical assistance, or knowledge would help you deal with the gender challenges you are facing? Just your top 2 or 3 would be really beneficial. And anyone with thoughts in the audience, please put it in the chat. Weena, you first.
Thank you, Patty. Yeah, I think I have on my list. I would be useful. I mean, all the speakers have an excellent, guidance, technical guidance, which I think is very sufficient. Is more importantly to put that into practice. Get familiar with it. Try to relate it with our projects because I think it's all very relatable from Erica and then Jyoti, Sarah, and also Stella. The follow resources, I think, to us, it's very supporting. It's very, very useful indeed, and it's hands-on as well. What would be needed again, as I said, for Indonesian case, because we have 5 locations with different social dynamics and culture, including gender, gender context and gender barrier and everything. And our backbone would be is our field coordinator on the site. So a guidance like 1-pager checklist for gender responsive actions, even on the very simple level. Like we have heard from all the speakers, also from the example from our colleague from Mexico and Burundi. I think training is one of the key, and also all those integrating something into the document, for example. So if there's a 1-pager checklist that we could use as our self-assessment for a very field level project team, I think that would be useful. I'm sure it's already there in the guidance book, but if we can have something simple and then we can translate that into our local language, I think that would be useful. And I think what another capacity that will be needed is also in terms of communication and knowledge management. We have so many stories, so many things happening on the field since the planning level up to the implementation level. But we might lose documenting the gender aspect of it because of the lack of knowledge. So it would be useful also if we could get a support or technical assistance how to effectively and strategically capture stories from the field, the do's and the don'ts, for example, so that we don't miss that point, because when the activity is gone, that we cannot repeat it again. So if there's a kind of sharing or any technical assistance to that would be useful. Also, if the FOLUR team global can provide a channel to promote inspirative stories, lesson learned voices from the field in more routine level, not only in this kind of webinar, that would be also useful. One more, the last one is a regional based or thematic based discussion on selected topics to accommodate more conducive timing, targeting more participants from respective countries or region would be also useful. So from the project on the same level of implementation, or we could learn from a more mature project on this very specific or similar issue. I think that would be also helpful. Okay, that's all. I'm going to stop now. Patty, back to you.
I'm not sure if we have Patty with us. Maybe she dropped the connection. So I will invite you, Florencia, to please provide also your insights. Por favor, adelante.
Gracias, Sandra.
Please go ahead. Thank you, Sandra. Just 1 minute, please, Florencia. Sure. Well, I'm going to focus on 3 main points. I believe it would be very useful for us as tools, as technical assistants, to increase the control that women have over resources, because over the land and also over the other productive resources, I think this is where we have to work the most. The materials that have been generated internationally do not have the
Voir au niveau national n'ont pas les détails dont nous avons
trabajar en ese aumento del control de los recursos de las mujeres. Por otro lado, el segundo punto es, creo que tenemos que seguir trabajando y nos sería muy útil tener más sensibilización y alternativas concretas para reducir la carga de trabajo que tienen las mujeres, que sabemos que es más grande que la de los hombres y que muchas veces desde nuestras iniciativas con el genuino interés de querer involucrar y llegar cada vez a más mujeres, podemos terminar agregando más trabajo todavía sobre ellas. Entonces, estas alternativas para reducir esta carga de trabajo creo que son indispensables. Y por último, algo que creo que sería muy útil también es tener recursos para trabajar particularmente en el tema masculinidades para la igualdad a lo largo de las distintas etapas de la cadena de valor, porque creo que nos estamos enfocando muchísimo en las mujeres, que es muy importante, pero que también tenemos que abordar el tema género desde las masculinidades, sobre todo para evitar como backlash sobre las propias mujeres a partir de buscar empoderarlas. Entonces, eso sería lo tercero en lo que me gustaría enfocarme, el tema de masculinidades.
Thank you very much, Vinny and Florencia, for your inputs. And Leonie, we have just 1 minute left for you. If you can also summarize some of the resources that you need.
Merci beaucoup. Je dirais en termes de ressources, c'est juste les renforcements, ressources liées au renforcement de capacité et surtout pour agir sur les normes et les pratiques au niveau du Burundi, mais aussi rehausser la capacité à produire, c'est-à-dire l'accès aux revenus pour les femmes, l'autonomisation en fait, l'accès aux connaissances agricoles, aux nouvelles technologies. C'est ce renforcement de capacité et les capacités financières à rehausser. Pour me résumer, on agit sur les normes et croyances, le renforcement des capacités et rehausser les capacités en termes financiers des femmes. 3 aspects importants pour nous. Merci.
Thank you very much to the 3 panelists. Alejandra, maybe you can stop sharing the slide. Thank you also to our presenters, Erika, Estela, Sara, Jyoti. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We don't have time for questions and with sorts of interaction and the chat box, so it's clear that this is a very relevant topic for the agricultural and commodity systems and restoration. So we invite you, if you want to continue the conversation, if you want to know more about what we are doing, we invite you to join the FACS community. Alejandra is going to share the information in the chat box. And please don't hesitate to contact us. And thank you again. Patty had some problems with the connection, and we really also want to thank her because she was the one who was organizing and designing and facilitating this event. And please, if you have time, please also fill out the survey. This is on the chat box, and you will receive an email with the recording and with all the information of this event. Thank you again.